It was a rainy afternoon when my husband Daniel rushed out the door. He had an urgent meeting, something about a last-minute crisis at work. I barely had time to kiss him goodbye before the sound of his car faded away into the distance. I stood by the window, watching the rain pour down, feeling a strange sense of unease, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. About half an hour later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, there stood Jake, my husband's best friend. He looked drenched, his dark hair plastered to his forehead from the rain. Jake and Daniel had been best friends since college, practically brothers. He had always been around, like family, though I had never really paid much attention to him outside of their friendship. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," Jake said, rubbing the back of his neck. "But I was in the neighborhood, and my car broke down." I tried calling Daniel, but it went straight to voicemail. "Do you mind if I come in for a bit?" I hesitated for just a moment, feeling that odd sensation of unease creep back in, but what harm could there be? It was Jake, after all. I stepped aside and let him in. "Of course, you can stay until the rain lets up," I replied, offering him a towel. "You look like you've been through a storm." Jake laughed, a deep, familiar sound. "You could say that." As he dried himself off, I made us both a cup of tea. We sat at the kitchen table, the sound of rain pattering against the windows creating a strange sense of intimacy. There was something different about Jake today, though I couldn't quite place it. He seemed more present, his usual playful demeanor was subdued, and instead, there was a certain intensity in his eyes as he watched me. "You've got a nice place," he said, his gaze wandering around the room before settling back on me. "Daniel's lucky." "I don't think I've ever told you that." I smiled politely. "We've worked hard for it. And, well, he's lucky too. I mean, you've been such a good friend to him." Jake nodded but didn't say anything for a moment. The silence between us grew, not uncomfortable, but heavy. I stirred my tea, suddenly unsure of what to say. The rain continued to fall outside, but the warmth inside the house felt almost stifling. Finally, Jake leaned back in his chair, his eyes still locked on mine. "You know, I've always wondered something." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. What would things have been like if Daniel hadn't come into the picture first? The question caught me off guard. My heart skipped a beat, and I laughed nervously, though nothing about the situation felt funny. "What do you mean?" Jake smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You know what I mean." Suddenly, the air between us seemed charged with an unspoken tension. I wasn't sure how to respond. This was Jake, Daniel's best friend. I had known him for years, but something had shifted in the room, something that made me feel like I was walking on thin ice. Before I could say anything, Jake stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the rain. His voice was low when he spoke again. "I've always admired you more than you know." I sat there, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched my cup of tea. Jake's words hung in the air like an unsaid secret, a confession hidden in plain sight. "Admired me?" I wasn't sure if I'd heard him right, or if the rain pounding against the windows had distorted my understanding. It wasn't like Jake to be this way. He was always lighthearted, never serious, especially not like this. "Jake," I started, unsure of what to say. "What are you talking about?" He turned from the window, his expression unreadable. The Jake I had always known, the jokester, the laid-back best friend, seemed far away. Instead, he stood there, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity one hadn't noticed before. "Help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Your support is what makes this journey possible, so don't forget to subscribe." "I'm not trying to make things awkward," he said, walking back to the table. He pulled up the chair next to me and sat down, much closer than before. "But I think we both know things have been a little different between us lately." I shook my head, confused. "Different? What do you mean?" His hand moved toward mine on the table, stopping just short of touching it. I could feel the warmth from his skin, the slight brush of his fingers. A knot formed in my stomach. The casual friendliness we once shared seemed to have vanished, replaced by something I didn't know how to handle. Every time I've been around you lately, it's like there's something unspoken between us, Jake continued, his voice low and calm. Something I've been feeling for a while, but I didn't want to admit it until now. I pulled my hand away, standing up from the table, trying to create some distance between us. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Jake was like family, someone I trusted. There was no way he could mean what I thought he did. Jake, I'm married to your best friend, I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice shook slightly. This can't. He stood up, cutting me off mid-sentence. I know. And I would never do anything to hurt Daniel. I need you to know how I feel. I can't keep pretending like I don't care about you, like I don't notice the way you look at me sometimes. I froze, replaying his words in my head. Did I look at him in some particular way? Had I somehow given him the impression that there was more between us? I searched my mind for moments, instances where things could have been misunderstood, but nothing stood out. As far as I knew, everything between us had been completely normal, until now. You're wrong, I said quietly. I don't look at you like that. He smiled, but it was sad, not triumphant. Maybe not on purpose, but it's there. The way we talk, the way we've started spending more time together when Daniel's busy. I can feel it, even if you're not ready to admit it to yourself. A wave of guilt washed over me. Had I been careless? Too comfortable around him? In my mind, everything I had done was out of friendship, out of the trust that came from knowing someone so well. But Jake seemed to believe there was more, and I wasn't sure how to undo the damage those beliefs had caused. The rain outside intensified, echoing the storm brewing inside the house. I couldn't help but feel trapped, caught between loyalty to my husband and this sudden, unexpected confession from the person closest to him. I love Daniel, I whispered, more to myself than to Jake, as if reminding myself of what was real. I know, Jake said, stepping closer again. And I'm not asking you to stop loving him. I don't know what I'm asking. Maybe I just needed to get this off my chest. The honesty in his voice surprised me. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him, for the confusion he seemed to be going through. But this was too much, too far. I think you should go, I said firmly, looking him in the eyes. This can't happen. He didn't move, not at first. Instead, he stood there, searching my face, maybe hoping for a different response. But I stood my ground, arms crossed, trying to keep some semblance of control in a situation that felt rapidly slipping away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake nodded. You're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things weird. He turned and grabbed his coat from the chair, heading toward the door. Just before he stepped outside, he looked back at me one last time. For what it's worth, I'm not trying to ruin anything between you and Daniel. I couldn't keep lying to myself. Then he left, disappearing into the rain-soaked evening. The house was silent again, save for the drumming of the storm against the windows, but inside, my thoughts were louder than ever. What just happened? How had everything changed so quickly? And most importantly, how would I tell Daniel about this, if I even should? The door clicked shut behind Jake, leaving me alone with the steady, unrelenting sound of rain. The echo of his words lingered in the room like a whisper I couldn't shake. I stood still, staring at the empty space he had just vacated, my heart pounding in my chest as if it were trying to make sense of the tangled mess inside me. I walked slowly to the window, staring out at the rain as it blurred the world beyond. The glass was cool against my fingertips, and I pressed my palm to it, trying to ground myself. The truth was, Jake's confession had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I had feelings for him, at least not in the way he thought, but because it exposed cracks I hadn't realized existed in my own life. As I stood there, my thoughts drifted back to the past few months. Daniel had been so busy, so preoccupied with work, with his constant meetings and deadlines. There had been moments where I'd felt like I was living with a ghost, seeing him only in fleeting moments, his mind always elsewhere. I had brushed it off, telling myself that it was just a phase, that work was hectic for him and things would get back to normal soon. But they hadn't. And in the void that had formed between us, Jake had slipped in unnoticed at first, like a shadow that gradually became more familiar. We had started spending more time together, laughing, talking, sharing stories, simple moments that didn't seem important at the time. But now, standing here replaying everything in my mind, I wondered if there had been more significance to those moments than I allowed myself to see. Had I been lonely? The question hit me hard, like a wave crashing unexpectedly. Was that what this was really about? Not Jake, not his feelings for me, but the growing distance between me and Daniel? I hated to admit it, but there was a part of me that had felt neglected. I had missed Daniel's presence, missed the way we used to talk for hours, missed the small gestures of love and affection that had once been the core of our relationship. And Jake had been there, filling the void I hadn't even realized was growing. I sighed, running a hand through my hair, my mind racing in 1,000 directions. I didn't love Jake. That much I knew. But there was no denying that I had allowed our friendship to become something more complicated, something that had now spiraled out of control. What did this mean for my marriage? Should I tell Daniel? The thought of it made my stomach churn with anxiety. I could imagine his reaction, the hurt in his eyes, the betrayal he might feel, not because I had done anything physically wrong, but because I had let something emotional build between me and his best friend without even realizing it. But what if I didn't tell him? What if I buried this moment, pretended like Jake's confession had never happened, and moved on with my life? I could distance myself from Jake, set boundaries, and let everything return to normal. Daniel would never have to know. But was that fair? To Daniel? To Jake? Or even to myself? The silence in the house was deafening, amplifying the weight of the decision that lay before me. I could feel the gravity of it settling in my chest, pulling me deeper into my thoughts. It wasn't just about Jake's feelings, it was about the state of my marriage, the cracks that had formed between Daniel and me, the distance that had grown so subtly I hadn't even seen it coming. How had we gotten here? I thought back to when Daniel and I first met, the excitement, the thrill of falling in love. We had been so young, so full of hope and ambition. I remembered the nights we spent talking until sunrise, the laughter, the shared dreams, the way we used to look at each other like we were the only two people in the world. It all seemed so far away now, like a distant memory from another life. Somewhere along the way, life had happened. Responsibilities piled up, work took over, and we had let the little things, the things that mattered, slip through the cracks. And now, I was standing here in our home, wondering how to fix something that felt broken. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wasn't going to fall apart, not now, not over this. I loved Daniel. I knew that. But love wasn't always enough. It needed attention, care, the kind of effort we hadn't been giving each other lately. I wasn't sure what the next step would be. The only thing I knew for certain was that something had to change. I couldn't keep going like this, pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped me out of my thoughts. I glanced out the window and saw Daniel's car, headlights cutting through the rain. He was home early, much earlier than I had expected. My heart raced again, but for a different reason this time. I had been so lost in my thoughts, in everything that had just happened, that I hadn't prepared myself for this moment. I wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. But there he was, walking toward the door, keys in hand. In a few moments, he would walk in, and I would have to decide whether to tell him the truth or keep it locked away inside. The door opened, and Daniel stepped in, shaking the rain from his coat. He looked tired, worn out from the long day, but he smiled when he saw me. "Hey, you," he said, his voice warm, familiar. I smiled back, but it felt forced, strained. My mind was still spinning, still caught between the weight of the truth and the fear of what it might do. "Hey," I replied softly, my voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. He walked over to me, pressing a quick kiss to my forehead. "Everything okay?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly as he noticed the tension in my face. I hesitated, the words sitting on the edge of my tongue, heavy and unspoken. This was the moment. I could either tell him everything, or I could bury it, pretend like nothing had changed. But something had changed, and deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "There's something we need to talk about." Daniel's eyes widened, concern immediately etched on his face. He set his bag down, sensing the seriousness in my voice. "What is it?" he asked quietly, stepping closer. I took a deep breath, the weight of everything crashing down at once. "It's about Jake." His expression shifted, his gaze sharpening. "Jake?" I nodded, my heart pounding. "He said something today. Something I didn't expect. He has feelings for me." Daniel stood still, the silence thick between us. He didn't speak, but I could see the hurt flash across his face. My throat tightened, and I waited, unsure of what he would say next. Finally, he exhaled, his voice low and steady. "Did anything happen?" "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. "But we can't ignore this, Daniel. Something's been missing between us for a while now, and we need to fix it." Daniel stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. We do." And just like that, in the quiet of our home, we both realized the conversation wasn't just about Jake. It was about us.